Hey everyone, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Soraya.
And we make movies.
Here are 6 things we learned this year making films together in 2023.
Let's jump into it. Okay, so our first lesson from making films in 2023 that stands out to me at the end of the year here is to figure out what your secret weapon is as a filmmaker and then lean into that. And let me give a couple of examples from some of the films that we worked on this year. One thing that I think is a secret weapon for the films that we work on is using outdoor locations to bring a lot of production value to our stories. We're very small, no budget filmmakers, and we normally don't have the ability to have access to a really nice indoor location that would require us to have expensive insurance, for example. So what we end up doing is using outdoor locations and using the natural beauty that abounds where we live to add production value to our stories. So I think that every filmmaker has some sort of secret weapon that you can lean into that is a strength of yours that will help to elevate your film. So instead of worrying about the weaknesses that all of us no-budget filmmakers are going to have in terms of gear or other resources, instead lean into whatever your secret weapon is and lean into that strength and let that elevate your films. And that's really something that worked out well for us this year.
Lesson number 2. When in doubt, cut the dialogue. This lesson really came into play on our film The Last Directive, which is a sci-fi short film, which means there's really extensive world building, and on our first draft of it, a lot of that was coming through as clunky expositional dialogue. All of us could tell that it sucked and it wasn't really good because it was just absolutely weighed down by too much telling and not enough showing. So took a step back and thought about one of my favorite short films, Paperman, which is a short film that's told with no dialogue, but it happens to be really emotionally moving and everything is just shown. So went through and just took out every single piece of dialogue that was in the story other than the required lines, and that ultimately ended up saving what we had as a story for that competition. The other film where that came into play was the end of Submerged. When we were writing at the end of Submerged, we got to basically the crux of the emotional story, but the dialogue between our main character and his therapist was just becoming too clunky and honestly moralistic. Matthew suggested that we cut it entirely, so we did, and I think that ultimately impacted the film for the better and just again kind of brought home that lesson of show, don't tell.
So our third lesson that we learned making films this year was to be willing to take a risk. And this was especially a lesson that I learned several times. There were a couple of instances where I was sort of nervous about something that we were going to be attempting on the films that we were making. There were certain elements that were beyond something that we had tried before, especially in the realm of stunts. Soraya and Evelyn had written these various big moments into the scripts, and I was kind of nervous about them, but ultimately we decided to take the risk and go for these big moments. We had, lots of plans in place to make sure it was all going to happen safely, so this was not a foolhardy risk that we were taking, but it still was pushing outside of our comfort zone and outside of my comfort zone as a director in figuring out how to piece these sequences together. But we went for them, and it really paid off. We got big moments in these films that connected with the story and tied in with the emotion that we were going for, which is always the priority. So I think I learned to be willing to take a risk. And even if I can't see exactly from the very beginning how something is fully going to play out, how it's going to fit together in the film and everything, trusting the team that I'm working with that are encouraging me to take a risk and just being willing to go for those big moments is really something that I learned several times this year that I'm going to be taking into films in this next year.
Lesson number 4. Pre-production is invaluable. You cannot be too prepared for your film days. Something that has just become more and more apparent with every project that I worked on this year, including our own films and then films for other studios and other production companies, was that pre-production can make or break how your film days are going to run. Being prepared could mean having a shot list. Every single member of your production crew can benefit from there being a shot list. I did production design on a couple sets this year, and being able to look at a shot list would be helpful for people in that department. Just really great for keeping people on track and being timely. One of the short films we made this year was an action comedy, and had we been a little bit more prepared beforehand with rehearsals to actually plan out and practice the choreography, we wouldn't have ended up choreographing on location, which really ate into our film time, given that we were hiking out to the location and we had to be finished before sunset. Really just caused issues while we were filming, and that could have been avoided with a little bit more effort into pre-production. So don't skip pre-production, it is very valuable.
Lesson number 5 is don't be afraid of failure when you're making films. This is something that I've had to work on over the years. I have been many times afraid of failing in the context of filmmaking, and that ends up actually causing me to not make as many films as I want to because I'm wanting them all to be perfect. But I feel like I learned this year, a little bit more at least, to not be as afraid of failure. And this especially came in the context of our micro short films that we worked on. There were several of those that just weren't quite as good as some of the rest of them. There was one that was even a full-on failure where we totally lost the light while we were shooting it, and it just kind of made the story confusing. It just didn't end up working. But I learned a lot from all of those experiences, and it helped me to see the broader picture of not being afraid of failure, because failure can lead to so many good things. It can lead to more opportunities to improve and grow as a filmmaker. In fact, I think you grow more through your failures than you do through your successes, and I've experienced that many times over the years, and certainly in the films that we worked on this year. So I just want to encourage you to not be afraid of failure in your films. Don't let that be a scary thing. Let that be a thing that is an opportunity, like I said, for growth and for you to do even better in the future, and then to fail again, which will give you an opportunity to grow some more and do even better.
Lesson number 6 is communication. We'll probably need to learn it again and again and again, but you really can't over-communicate on a film set. Ultimately, film sets operate off the same foundation that everything does, which boils down to relationships. Communication sets the tone for your film set. Whether you're making a film with strangers or with your friends like we do, communication can really make or break the film experience. Your tone, the words that you're using, and the attitude that you're communicating it with, whether it's impatience or gratitude or just the general levels of energy, that can all really play into people's experience on set. We had a film this year where the communication was lacking, and Last Directive kind of suffered. It was really chaotic on set. We had miscommunications as to certain roles for crew members, and that just ended up in people not having as good of a time and feeling undervalued. And that's something that we want to avoid in the future. We had better communication on the set of Submerged, partially because we were all together in the same area, which basically just gave us a shortcut to communication. But it was really valuable to see the difference between those two film sets and to just take that with us into the future. So to summarize, communication is key on film sets. You want to be mindful of the way that you're communicating, and to just prioritize having excellent communication between individuals and then with everyone.
So there you have it, 6 lessons that we learned while making films in 2023. Hopefully some of these are helpful to you as well. If you have any lessons that you learned while making your own films in 2023, put it down in the comments. Would love to hear, and we can all get better as filmmakers together. I will see you in the new year, and remember, when you're making a film, every second counts.